Warriors, this is the Spartan Underground. And now, your host, James 300 Foster.
This episode, as well as every episode of the Spartan Underground, is brought to you by Show You Roll. That's SHOYOROLL. Show You Roll provides the jiu-jitsu community with simply the best BJJ uniforms and awesome apparel, as well as duffel bags, wallets, all sorts of really cool jiu-jitsu gear, very stylish. Again, simply the best BJJ uniforms on the market. My favorite, they fit me the best out of anything I've ever tried, so make sure you give them a look over at showyouroll.com. Every episode is also brought to you by Albino and Preto. Albino and Preto, also referred to as A&P, is a related brand to Show You Roll that also makes awesome jiu-jitsu uniforms and apparel with their own unique style. So make sure you go check them out over at albinoandpreto.com. That's ALBINOANDPRETO.com. Our featured sponsor for the Spartan Underground is Impact Custom Mouthguards. Impact Mouthguards is the official provider of mouthguards for USA Boxing, and they make some awesome grappling mouthguards. Really the best mouthguard, best custom mouthguard that I've ever used for jiu-jitsu. You don't feel like it's affecting your breathing or anything, and it's very thin while still providing a great level of protection. So if you go over there to impactmouthguards.com and put in the code Spartan10, that's Spartan10, you'll get 10% off your first custom mouthguard with Impact Mouthguards. So go check them out. Again, that's www.impactmouthguards.com. Greetings, Spartan Warriors. Welcome to episode 13 of the Spartan Underground. A lot of people think 13 is an unlucky number, but I feel very lucky to have pro Marvel Comics artist Ron Garney on this episode of the podcast. So a lot of you may not know this, or you may. I'm a huge comic book fan. I love to draw. I've been drawing since I was 13, so I aspire to one day be as good as Ron Garney at comic book art, but jiu-jitsu's my main passion, so I don't get as much time to draw. I probably won't reach that level, but Ron's an awesome guy, and he also happens to be a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so we were able to talk about a lot of the parallels between Jiu-Jitsu and art, and I think it was a really cool, really enlightening episode. So I hope you guys think the same thing too, and without any further delay, here is Ron Garney. Welcome, Spartan Warriors. I'm here tonight with Marvel Comics artist Ron Garney. How you doing tonight, Ron?
I'm doing all right. So are you, James?
I think we have a bad connection.
How you doing, man?
I'm
Good
doing
to be
good, brother.
The Spartan Underground finally.
I know this has been a long time in the making. I think you were a little sore at me. You had some hurt feelings there.
No, not really. I was waiting by my computer for months, and then I realized this mother effer ain't gonna call.
You started to decide I wasn't gonna call, and you should get back to work on Daredevil, right?
Pretty much. Pretty much. Like, you had asked me right when you started the thing. You said, "Hey, man, I'm starting up my own podcast. Would you like to be a guest?" I'm like, "Sure. Let me know. I'd be happy to." And then 3 years went by. So
I know. Yeah,
and
that
it's like 100 guests on there. So I figured,
the fact that this is episode 13 shows you how productive I've been with getting people on the podcast.
one every 3 or 4 months. But honestly, it wasn't hurt at all. I'm happy to
Sure.
be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you on here. I thought it'd be cool to talk a little bit about how we met. So, it's funny. I tell people I've met so many people through jiu-jitsu that it amazes me. I remember I kind of already knew what you looked like. I think I'd maybe seen a picture that you had trained jiu-jitsu, so I had an idea, but I wasn't aware of what area you were in or anything. So I come walking in to teach at the Black Belts for Butterflies seminar there in Connecticut, and I'm like,
Right.
holy crap, that's one of my favorite Marvel comic artists standing over there, and he does jiu-jitsu.
And that was just as weird for me as it was for you. It's just standing and have this walk over and say, "Are you Ron Garney?" And then I say I'm a big fan. It was cool though. It was really cool actually.
Yeah, it
And
definitely was. I think we hit it off pretty good. We're both we like to joke around and everything. So, and of course, we both love jiu-jitsu
well,
and
didn't you tell me you had met me at a con or something before that?
no, I hadn't met you. No, I hadn't met you. I think you might have been one that at one that I was at or something, and I ended up missing you or something like that. But no, that was our first time meeting there in Connecticut. So
It was cool too because I had owned a school at the time, and so in front of a few of my students, she came walking over, made me feel pretty important. So it was pretty. Hey, can I take a picture with you? And everybody's like, "Who is that guy?" So it was
now,
pretty.
are most of your students aware, or were they aware? You said in past tense there that you owned a school. So
Yeah.
at the time when you were owning your school and everything, were your students aware that you were a professional comic artist? Did they care about that, or did they just care about the jiu-jitsu Ron Garney?
No, they all knew about it, of course. I mean, it was kind of a little bit of a gimmicky thing about my school. Me and Chris Watson owned it together, and yeah, they all knew. A couple of them were familiar with my work even. So it was fun. I used to do some drawings for a few of the students here and there, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I find that a lot of people who are into jiu-jitsu tend to be drawn to whether it be comics or artwork and those types of things. I think it's kind of how our brains are wired or something, that we're attracted to,
Yeah,
more artistic things.
for sure, for sure. It's you have to be slightly creative on the mats. I think that's how
Definitely.
right. I mean, it's one thing to be technical, but it's another thing once you have all the knowledge to actually create. Because you can learn all the things you can learn in jiu-jitsu, learn how to do triangles, but to find them in places where you wouldn't expect to find them is where the creativity comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody can put their own flair and their own style to it.
Sure, for sure.
So I know a lot of this stuff, but I'm going to ask anyway, so in case the audience doesn't know, how did you end up getting into comics and being a professional illustrator?
Let's see. I mean, I was drawing since I was little, and I was into superheroes at a very young age. Now that is way back in the early '60s, way before your time.
Oh yeah.
So I identified with them, very early on. I had drawings I did when I was 2 or 3 of Superman and Batman. They look like little balloons with backward S's on them, and so I identified with that kind of mythology right away. But I didn't really get into the business of it. I didn't even think I was going to get into the business of it until I was out of college. I was out of school, didn't know what I was going to do. I was managing a couple nightclubs and bartending and things like that. And then I just one of these fellow bartenders I was working with had a comic behind the bar at the time, and it was a Secret Wars comic. It was like 1984, I think it was. And I'd always had an interest in directing, possibly getting into photography or directing films or something like that. I graduated from Southern Connecticut with an illustration degree, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And so when I picked up the comic book that he was reading, I was like, oh wow, this sort of tapped into all those things. Composition of photography was sort of in there, in the panels, and storytelling of comics are sort of a short form of directing and storytelling, and that's what they use in movies anyway. So,
right,
sort of just it clicked with me right away. And I had read them when I was younger, read comics, but it had been years since I had read a comic book. So after I read that one behind the bar, I kind of ran down the street, asked him where he got the comic, and went down the street to the bookstore, local bookstore, late at night after work, and just picked up a bunch of old comics. I think I picked up some John Burns, some Frank Miller, things like that, and just started reading. And I decided I could probably do that as a career, and that's where it began.
Very cool. So you had some formal training, but how did you kind of develop your comic art style? Did you really get into, studying figure drawing and all of that at that point after you'd been looking at the comics?
No, well, again, I had been drawing since I was little. I mean, I did figure drawing in grammar school and high school, and I was an artist.
Okay.
I actually was going to be a fantasy illustrator, kind of like Frazetta or Boris or
Right.
Michael. I was a fan of Michael Whalen, those kinds of paperback cover art artists, and so that's where my original direction was going to be. So I was always into the fantasy art. So I had some training. I was into Norman Rockwell and the Wyeths and things like that. But by the time I got to the comic books, I started looking at comic book artists and was really sort of impacted by how good some of them were,
Right.
So, John Buscema, for instance, his figure drawing and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Startling to me. So I kind of just hooked into it. And I remember John Buscema from when I was younger. I remember Kirby, because like I said, I had comics growing up when I was very young, but then I forgot about them once I got to, by the time 7th or 8th grade rolled around, I forgot about comic books, and I was into girls and got into music, and I was into sports and played sports, basketball and baseball, and, so I had a lot of other distractions. So, so I had to sort of rediscover all of that. And it was cool, though. It was cool to look at some of the comics and go, oh, I remember these. So
Yeah. Now, when you were coming up, who were some of your biggest influences in the comic art industry? You mentioned Buscema, who's I think he's one of the integral ones that a lot of people have as somebody's art that inspired them as far as his figure drawing and everything. Who were some of your biggest influences that you did you pattern yourself after anybody, or did it take you a while to develop your own style and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I remembered Buscema and Kirby from when I was younger, and I also read when I was younger, probably in 6th, 7th grade. I remember reading Creepy and Eerie magazines, those Warren publications, and
some of the more like a horror, some of the horror comics.
I read Vampirella, but it wasn't like it was. I read them, but I was really drawn to the artists too. Like I forgot who the guy was who did Vampirella, but his style was so good. He could draw so well, and I just remember being fascinated by how well he drew. I think his name was Gonzalez or something.
Right.
But anyway, so I remembered those, and I remember Kirby. When I was very young, I remember Kirby I had a few of those oversized Marvel books. One was with Kirby the Hulk versus the Thing, fighting on the George Washington Bridge. That story, and it just always stuck out in my head. And I remember I had the Muhammad Ali Superman oversized one. I might even still have that somewhere. I think Neil Adams drew that, so I remember those guys. But then once I rediscovered comics many, many years later, I mean, that all came flooding back, but then I started discovering all kinds of different artists, at the time, like I said, Miller and Byrne. I had no idea who Byrne was. Zek was the guy I first looked at when I picked up the Secret Wars. And interestingly enough, that's a real interesting story because he lived right near me.
Oh, cool.
And I found out. So, so I was behind the bar. I picked up the Secret Wars. It was Mike Zeck had drawn it. And then somewhere, I think when I was talking to a guy at the bookstore, I said, how could I get into Marvel? What would I have to do? And he showed me this Marvel tryout book that John Romita Jr. drew. It was a big oversized book that you could draw in, and it was a contest they were putting out at the time, and you had to get it in by a certain date, and they were going to pick a winner, and you get a job at Marvel. So I entered it, and I think I sent it in right the day before the deadline. And I didn't win. I remember getting a rejection letter from Marvel, which sort of fueled my fire a little bit to get in because I was always good at drawing and stuff, and it kind of lit a fire under me because I wasn't used to being, rejected like that because I was always considered the guy who could draw in school and everything. He could draw so to have Marvel reject me was probably the best thing that ever happened. Because it lit a fire in me, and I became enthused about drawing and pursuing something. So that was interesting. Then I found out, like I said, after reading that comic, that Mike Zeck lived like 8 minutes from my house.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was weird, to pick that up after that many years of not looking at a comic book. It's Mike Zeck, and I asked the guy at the store, and he goes, this guy, Mike Zeck, lives in West Haven. I said, oh, really? So I just kind of looked it up in the phone book, and there he was. He was like 8 minutes from my house down the road. And so I called him up, and I just left him a message on his answering machine, asked him if he could look at my work, and he called me back, interestingly. And
that's really cool having that access back then.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous, too, having that be picked up and having a guy be right down the road. I mean, he could have lived anywhere in the world, what are the odds that he lived down the street from me?
Yeah, exactly.
So it was pretty cool.
So did you end up building a little relationship with him, or did he give you any good advice on breaking in?
Yeah, he called me back. I talked with him on the phone, and he was, he told me to just send him some samples. At first, I said, maybe I could come to your house. He said no, and I was like, yeah, I understood that.
Yeah.
So I sent him the samples. He called me back, and we went over on the phone. He told me the things I needed to work on. And then I forgot. I don't remember how it happened, but he ended up coming up to my bar where, I was working and had a couple of drinks. And, he invited me out to a convention to sit at his table and sort of started from there. And then I think a year went by or so, and I just kept working on samples and, as I was working, and would send him stuff, a month or two would go by, and I would send him some more. And then I got to a point where I was playing volleyball with him, and, invited me to play volleyball with him and a team in West Haven. And so I started hanging out with all them, and he brought me into Marvel when he thought I was ready. He brought me into Marvel in D.C., And so I took the train in, and I went to D.C. first, and they offered me a job right away on Animal Man. And then, so I did. It was an 8-page thing. They wanted to see if I could meet the deadline.
Right.
So I did it, and then when I turned it in, the day I brought it in, they said that the guy who was originally slated to do it changed his mind, decided he wanted to do it because he originally turned it down. Then said he wanted to do it. It was with Grant Morrison.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I almost worked with Grant on Animal Man.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much. But, in the meantime, I had other offers from Marvel already. So I had offered to do GI Joe and Moon Knight. So I just went over to Marvel, and that's how it all started. And that was 30 years ago.
Holy cow. Now, have you been at Marvel ever since, or have you done work for any other publishers since then?
I did work for DC for a couple of years. I was under contract with DC for 2 years, but that was, my career's had its ups and downs, and I was at Marvel for a while, and then I went through some personal tribulations, I guess, or trials.
Yeah.
And, my career was sort of floundering, but I went over to DC and I did JLA, and and it was sort of just for me, artistically speaking and creatively speaking, it was just at a low point. And I really needed to change, and I needed to ink my own work, and just, because to be honest with you, I was so burnt out after all the years, and all the drama I had experienced at Marvel with Captain America, and a lot of the rat race of it, and the deadlines, and the constant, that's all my life was, and I was still young. I was 28, and so from 28 to I don't know how many years I was there before I went to DC. It was a good decade, probably a decade of just sitting in a room drawing, making deadlines, trying to make a good career, but I was burning out fast. And you can see it in the work. My work, after Captain America, my work started really plummeting. And
I think it's interesting because I have a feeling your profession is similar to mine in the sense that, people go, "Oh, you run a jiu-jitsu school, that must be easy." They don't see all the thing. "Oh, you just show up and teach class. That sounds easy." And they don't see all the hours behind the scenes that make all that possible.
for sure, you have people who want to compete. You're responsible for all these. The people. And believe me, I have a little experience, not as much as you in it, but I did almost school for a few years, so I understand completely. And it's a lot of work and a lot of discipline to make sure the school is run professionally, and that people look up to you and look to you for the answers they're looking for. You're responsible for all of that.
Yep. Yep.
Not,
And I have a feeling with comics, it's one of those things where, oh, you get to draw, draw me something like it's no big deal. They don't realize the work that goes into, putting out a comic or, completing a drawing, how many hours that you put into it. Um,
well,
you know,
the general public takes that for granted. Not even just people who are into comics or anything, but
yeah.
most people are sort of, I don't mean ignorant in a negative way, but they're just sort of ignorant of what, or naive, I should say, is a better word, of what actually it takes for you to get to a place where you can actually draw well, or actually do jujitsu well. It takes so much work, and the gains come slowly, like anything else, and you have to just be patient and believe in yourself, and just keep and shut down that part of yourself that questions all of it.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that kind of leads nicely into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was I know when it comes to comics and aspiring artists, everybody, they want that secret to breaking in, and I think you already kind of gave a hint as to the I think I know what you're going to say. It's consistent, work towards that goal and not giving up. Pretty much just like jujitsu or anything else you want to become proficient at.
yeah, for sure, without a doubt. You're gonna have, we're human beings, and the human condition is not. Some people are more even than others, but the human condition in general is not an even one. You're gonna have ups and downs, and low points and high points and medium points, and you hit plateaus and you stagnate, and it's just a matter of really, again, just shutting off that part of yourself that questions all of it, and
Right.
just get back in there and just do it. I still, to this day, I could, sit at my table and I'm just like, oh my god, this is the last thing I feel like doing, and this is hell, and then there's other days I'm like, man, this is the greatest thing ever, But
Right.
it's just we have the areas inside ourselves that we have to go to, or that we go through. And jujitsu is the same thing, How many times you walked in the gym and go, I don't know if I even want to do this anymore, At least for me, especially because I started later. I was always athletic, played sports and things like that. I wish I had started when I was younger,
Right.
got a lot more competition experience and things like that because I love it. But at this point, my body's at a point where I can't really do it like I used to do it. But you know, it's like you go in there and you just, you question all of it, And but I'll tell you, once you get through it, and it's the same thing in drawing. Like once you get through it, you've actually put in a good day of it, and you can always see the results at the end of the day, whether it be jujitsu or drawing, and you feel great. I know.
Absolutely. I always tell everybody, I guarantee you will feel better when you leave than you did coming into the school, no matter what your mental state was or how you were feeling coming in. I haven't seen anybody not leave feeling better than when they came into the school.
Yeah, that's kind of what when I got my black belt. It was like speech, speech, and I really hadn't even planned on speaking. I thought maybe I'd speak, but that was sort of what I touched upon. I didn't really say a whole lot, but that's sort of what I alluded to, is that you're gonna have days where you're gonna get your butt kicked, or you feel like you're gonna get your butt kicked, and you're not gonna feel like you want to go, but once you get in there, and at the end of the day, you're gonna be glad you did, and then you feel, that one day makes you feel that much closer to your goals, but actually way closer. When you walked in there, if you walk in a gym or you sit down and draw, you feel like it's so far away. Just that one day, and you produce something makes you feel like you're so much closer. And you may, it's still a long journey, but you are close. You are that much closer, and a large part of that is just getting in there and doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very hard for people to see that from the inside looking out. Um, but you know as well as I do, whether it be jujitsu or art or anything else, like from the outside looking in, we can see the progress that people are making. And I always encourage them to, you know, think about the version of you that first came through the door. Like, do you know a few more things than that person knew? Well, then you're
Yeah,
making progress.
for sure, for sure.
What's
You know
the?
what?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. Speaking of progress, like I see it in you. Like when you post little drawings that you post, you post a lot of headshots.
Right.
I think one of the last ones I saw, I hadn't seen anything in a while, and I was struck by the improvement you made. And it's baby steps. Obviously, you're doing it as much as you can when you can, but
Right.
it was a huge difference. But
That's
you have to
awesome, man.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I appreciate that you recognize that and that you mentioned that to me because that provided great motivation for me. And a reason I post a lot of headshots is because I've always felt that I have a pretty good understanding of anatomy, but I've always had trouble drawing faces and heads and things. So I find that I practice that a lot more lately than I used to.
Well, that's it. You should focus on your weaknesses. Again, to not keep comparing the jujitsu, but I don't know about you, but when I've trained over the years, I always focused on the things I didn't think I was good at, or put myself in the uncomfortable situations.
Yep, I'm the same way.
Felt like I couldn't get out of it. I would have guys just lay on top of me, and I didn't even care about rolling as much as I kept wanting them to put me in bad positions to see if I could get out of them. It's kind of like that in a drawing. You have to, and I tell this to guys that have done portfolio reviews for at conventions and things like that, because the one commonality I noticed in all of their work is that they always avoid the hard stuff.
Right.
It's never fails. You'll see the backgrounds. The buildings will look like cereal box flat with, where they don't understand perspective or any of those things because it's not the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And I would tell them, I said, that's the thing. Those are the things you should be attacking, and don't be afraid of light sources. And, you just have to be, there's nothing to be afraid of in any of it. I mean, you have to just be brave and just go in there. And if you're really serious about it, that's what you have to learn. You can do all the superhero shots you want and think, wow, that Wolverine looks cool as heck. He's another growling Wolverine face. But can you do that growling Wolverine full figure and, on a building leaping off a roof or in proper perspective? And the thing that people don't realize is when you do comic book art, most comic book artists are expert in so many areas of draftsmanship because you're forced to, You have to know perspective, and you have to know anatomy, and you have to know compositions and value, and there's just so many things you have to learn that I feel like comic book artists are really some of the technically best artists in the world, really. Some of the ones I've seen. There's
Definitely.
There's some guys out there that's just it's unbelievable how good they are. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think it kind of boils down to people look at making mistakes as failing, and they're afraid to make mistakes, and we got to keep comparing it to jiu-jitsu because the parallels are so great. I think with both I think both of them are arts in and of themselves, art forms. So there are a lot of parallels and a lot of comparisons you can make.
I think the reason people are afraid of making mistakes is correlative with how much they've put stock in drawing as being the thing that defines their esteem, if that makes any sense. In other words, if all I think I benefited from having a lot of different issues. I don't know if it's because I have a short attention span or something. Michael Golden told me that once. He said, I think you have a short attention span because he was looking at my work and he knew about all the other interests I have. And I said, oh, maybe. I said, but I think I benefited from that because I don't define myself on one thing that if I get criticized by that one thing, my whole worldview it gets shattered. It's like, have you ever seen those people on American Idol? These singers, they come in, they've been told their whole lives, you're a great singer, and then they come on there because they've built up this whole persona, their whole esteem is based on them thinking they can sing, and that's what they're going to do with their whole lives, so that's all they work on. And they get on there, and they're not that good, and they get told they're not that good, and it crushes them.
Yeah, because that's their whole identity.
Right, and I think that's what people are afraid of, is that they're going to be told something that's going to have to make them really take a hard look at themselves and decide, what are they going to do then? The one crutch they had is not there, and then they're in free fall. Right. So, they have to be, there's certain people you can sense when you're giving them critique, how to approach the critique with them. And then there's others that, if they have a bad attitude and they come to me and they're standing there looking around, rolling their eyes, I won't even look at their book, say, take it, go find someone else to look at it. But
yeah, go find someone who's going to tell you what you want to hear versus what you need to hear.
Exactly. Yeah. Most of the time when I do a review, I will show them, right? Because it's more impressive to show somebody, especially an aspiring artist. It's easy to say, well, you need to work on your light sources, and they just stand there like a deer caught in headlights, and it's kind of like they hear the Charlie Brown teacher, wah, 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 talking. Yeah. But it's one thing.
I think it helps them to have a little bit of direction. It's one thing to hear you need to work on this area. It's another thing to kind of see, what the person is referring to. I think depending on what type of a learner you are, it makes a big difference being able to see an example to use as a reference point.
That's what I was, even when I was young, my art teacher in grammar school, I can remember him. His name was David Orwell. I can remember him drawing things, and it was like magic. It's like, wow, because they're so evolved. And then even when I got into business, I mean, I remember was hanging out in one of the offices at Marvel, and Joe Kubert was there. And he was doing a cover, or he was doing something for somebody. And so to watch him just lay down a circle with a pencil and then start drawing with the ink was like, it was revelatory. It was like, wow, holy, the fact that he had such confidence in his ability to draw with the brush and to watch it come out of the brush, it was just magical. It was like just really something else. And I had a trained eye at that point, but it was still magic to me. So there's always levels, and you have to believe in and aspire to get there, and just think of it as inspiration and fun. Don't let it intimidate.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a friend right now. His name's Justin, and he's like, his art is really, really good. Like, I would consider him professional. Like, he's as good as many of the pros out there. But, I think editors and the talent scouts and things that he's sending stuff to, they're continuing to push him and try to get him to be even better, which can be frustrating. But I was telling him, I said, man, that's what's going to take you to the next level. Like, your stuff's already great, but think about how much better you're going to be with that motivation.
I remember you asked me to give a critique on a page or two of some. Is that the same guy?
Yeah, same guy.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah, he's really good, and he keeps getting kind of nitpicky critiques, but
From who?
well, he sent some stuff to the guy who's the talent scout for Marvel right now, I think, and he's got some positive feedback, but then there'll be little nitpicky things, and he's real good about taking critiques, so
Yeah.
he's taking it in stride, but at the same time, it can be difficult to keep a positive attitude when you feel like you're almost there, and then you get shot down.
It's become more competitive than ever, too.
I think so, yeah.
I think there's been a huge influx of artists over the years. It's amazing how it. I mean, even being on Instagram, I'm always struck by just the amount of artists and
Yeah.
people want. I mean, all over the world. People just wanting to draw and it was never like that when I was younger.
Yeah.
I mean, I got in, there weren't that many. I mean, now it's like everybody wants. I don't know if it's because of the movies or what the huge boom in that part of it was, but it's interesting because the comics, the sales of the comics haven't boomed like they, would be nice if they did, comparatively to the early '90s. Obviously, that boom, but they've kind of declined over the years, and they remain somewhat steady, but the amount of people wanting to do it far outweighs the actual reality of how much they sell in order for them to get a job doing it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I was telling him in regard to even getting a response to what he was sending, and I'm like, can you imagine how many hundreds of emails that guy gets every day with people wanting him to look at your work? I mean, the fact that he's even taking the time to give you some little critiques and send you some more scripts that he wants to see you do samples of is a big deal to me anyway. Kind of realizing how many people are trying to get in right now.
Yeah, maybe it's because of social media. We can see how many more people do it, but because I can remember way back talking to a submissions editor, he was telling me that they got like 500 submissions a week from all around, and
Yeah,
just you can't get to them all. You know,
I
so
bet you. I bet you, like you said, with social media and everything, I bet you it's even more now.
oh, for sure.
There's just more exposure.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how that works. It's kind of like kind of correlates again with jujitsu, and as jujitsu is getting more exposure in MMA and stuff, how jujitsu continues to grow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's been one of the weird things I've noticed too. Is just how it took over. You know, it used to be karate.
Yeah, it was. That's what I started in.
Yeah, karate, and now everything is jujitsu. But the difference is karate. You know, I mean, it's good. I mean, full contact sport karate is good. Teaches you discipline. You know, but there's a lot of frauds out there. You know, in it.
Definitely.
But with jujitsu, you can't be a fraud. You know, you get
You can't.
exposed.
You can. It's just a lot harder.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've seen one or two guys like try to be, you know, try to get through with some bad instruction, but they ultimately they get exposed. You know.
Yeah, like you said, they usually get exposed, and it's the old saying, the maths don't lie. The only way you can really get away with that is to never roll with anybody. So,
I like the reverse videos I've seen where the guys come in to schools and they pretend they're white belts just to play a joke on everything. There's one I saw, the guy comes in, he's a white belt. Let's just show him these things. And he comes in there and they teach him one move and he knows how to do it perfectly, you know. Or
yeah.
he rolls with the instructor and he taps out the instructor. That's embarrassing. And then
Yeah, it's
they
and then
reveal.
they and then they do the big reveal.
Yeah. Has
Well,
that
you're
ever? Well, you're too big. You're too big for the tap of you. Even
no,
if
you know what? When somebody comes in to visit or train, I always try to make sure that I'm able to roll with them. So I kind of always have my shields up a little bit, so to speak, if I'm rolling with somebody I'm not familiar with. So
yeah.
I think it would be pretty hard to catch me by surprise like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You can tell when somebody's better than they're letting on.
And like you said, I'm a little more imposing looking, so maybe people aren't as likely to try that with me as they may, you know.
I remember when
When
I
I
started myself, I was working out at this place, and but I was always a UFC fan, so just from watching UFC, I could, I knew what some things were called, or and I remember rolling with this kid, and the instructor was sitting there, and he said, "You say you've never done it before, but," and I was like, "No, I really haven't. It was just from watching UFCs."
yeah,
you know, but so you can sort of learn a little bit just from watching too. Not obviously it's a much longer, harder hill to climb, but
yeah, you can definitely gain a basic understanding. I had a guy come in that signed up a few weeks ago, and he's just one of those guys where you show him something once and he can do it, and he's been wanting to get into jiu-jitsu for a long time, and he has been watching some YouTube and things, and has a basic understanding, and
uh,
they just have a lot more resources available to them to kind of have a basic idea of what to expect when they come into class now.
didn't John Jones even say that I remember when he first hit the scene at the UFC, he said he was learning things just from watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, yeah, anybody can watch and get a basic idea, but like you said, it's nothing compared to getting, formal instruction regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely strips you down just to, strips you bare.
Yeah, it does.
You get tapped out, I mean, as I was at the time, I mean, I'm 220 right now. And at the time I started, I was around 220. Then when I got into, I lost a lot of weight just from doing jujitsu. I got down real light at one point. But I was always very strong when I was younger, like very strong. And so once I realized I couldn't rely on that the
Right.
to a certain degree, that that was a real eye opener. It just changed my whole thought process about that kind of stuff. So, and
Yeah,
that's what
most definitely.
that's what gets you. That's the hook that gets you. It
It
grabs
is.
the ego and rips it apart, and you have to go back. You have to go back for more.
Yeah, it's what keeps a lot of people going, and that's the great thing about jiu-jitsu. It's very it can become very addicting, very addictive.
Yeah, I mean, the competing too. Like, I mean, I have to have a shoulder surgery next month, a couple months, and but this guy who beat me a couple of years ago, I can't get it out of my head to this day. Like I want to get, but I gotta keep remembering I'm 55 years old. I'm not like, but my brain is still 30. I want to get back in there
Yeah,
again. So it's definitely, it definitely hooks you for life, I think.
it does. How did you first get into jiu-jitsu?
Well, like I said, I was always into UFC stuff, so I had an interest in it. But I remember I was so sick of lifting weights and just going to the gym. I was bored out of my gourd doing it. And I remember thinking, I boxed a little in high school, so I figured I wanted to get back into that. And I had just been thinking about it like the day before, and I went to FedEx to drop a package off to Santa Marble, and I just looked across the street and I saw an MMA school there, Jiu-Jitsu MMA. And I was like, oh. So I just walked in, talked to the guy, and gave him a membership that day and started. And it was Ultimate MMA. This guy, Andrew Calandrelli, was the instructor. And then he brought in this jiu-jitsu guy named Renato Migliaccio, who was really good. He actually was fought some MMA, and so I was hooked. At first, I started out being more into the boxing and the Muay Thai, but then once I put the gi on and I started working with Renato, I mean, I was doing the no gi with Andrew, and I was doing privates, and I was addicted to that. But I was also into the striking. But once I put the gi on, that just sort of caught me, and I actually broke my foot doing the Muay Thai, so
Oh,
I put a kibosh on the striking end of it. So I just was doing the gi, started doing the gi jujitsu, and
yeah.
I
What was it? I was gonna say, what was it about the gi that got you so hooked on it? I mean, a lot of people tend to want to avoid training in the gi. What was it about the gi that you liked so much?
um, well, initially the idea of wearing the gi, I didn't like the idea of it. I just wanted to do no gi, grappling, and
Right.
once I put it on, the way it opened up a whole new world of possibilities. For every one move you can do with no gi grappling, there were four other variations you could try with a gi. And it was just, I think it appealed to my creative side.
Yeah.
I was like, it slowed the game down, and I love playing chess, and it slowed the game down to where it was more of a real methodical thought, a game of chess there on the mats. When you're scrambling in no gi, it's scrambling and energy, and you have to find your spots quick, and it's slipperier once you get sweaty. But when you're using the gi, there's so many more techniques, things that are like chess moves when you're fighting your opponent, that I found it intriguing. So that's really probably what hooked me. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't millions of moves in the no-gi either, but just something about the way you can use the cloth to create leverage and elevate your opponents differently. Just really appealed to me.
Yeah, it really is endless. There's so many things you can do. And
Yeah.
I also find that it kind of, like you were talking about it, slowing things down a little bit. It forces people to be more technical when they train in the gi. You can't as easily power and slip out of things because you're slippery, you're covered with sweat.
Yeah.
A
And
lot of people,
you could slip into bad positions
right?
where
And
you
I think
normally get out of a no-gi. You slip into a bad position. Next thing you know, you're being choked. You
yeah, a
know.
lot of people develop bad habits. You know, if they're not under very good at no-gi instructor, where if they're not keeping them honest on certain things, they can develop bad habits. So I think the gi kind of equalizes that a little bit and forces you to, recognize that those holes in your game are there and kind of tighten everything up technique wise.
Yeah, for sure. I think the fact that it slows down forces you to um, analyze what you're doing. You know,
Right.
it's not no longer just about your instincts or your aggression or any of that. It should never be completely about aggression. But it forces you to really think, and that helps your no-gi game anyway. You know, because the moves you're making, like you said, are more technical and they're thought out. It's your muscle memory, because you're forced to slow it down. You're forced to get the technique right. Your muscle memory works better. I mean, it's just for me, it was just better all the way.
Yeah, and I think your level of being able to control somebody really gets refined. So, I tell my guys I roll the same way in no-gi as I do in gi. I do all the same things, and just some grips change and little differences. But
Right.
if all your jujitsu goes out the window when your gi is off, then you have a discrepancy in your game that has to be fixed because you should be able to do both.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it shifted. I mean, when I was first running my school, all it was about was, everybody wanted to do no-gi. And I remember when it shifted, it was when pretty much all the champions in ADCC were guys who trained in the gi, like, all the time, and then just took the gi off and went in and and did the ADCC and were winning these titles that people kind of step back and are like, oh, I need to train in the gi now.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like that at my old school. Um,
And
and I know
now we're seeing it shift back to no gi again.
I was just going to say that, like when I had my school, we just did gi. We didn't really have any no-gi nights, but a lot of the guys were saying, "Can we do no-gi? Can we do no-gi?" So we're doing it here and there, but it wasn't consistent. And then when when my school, we Chris and I disbanded from my school. One of the students took it over and reopened it next door. He took all the students, and which we were very happy about.
Right.
Because my schedule and everything, I couldn't continue doing it and running, trying to run a school and everything. There were a lot of reasons, but now at the new school, it's called Evolution Jiu Jitsu in Milford. A lot of great guys over there. Now they're doing I think, a lot of no-gi, because so you can see the appeal. People are still really drawn to that. And I do think the appeal of no-gi is that it's just very fast paced and there's probably a little more adrenaline in it. Um,
Yeah, I think there's that aspect. I think there's, kind of have these characters now being developed in Nogi that people follow. Some really talented people like your Gordon Ryans and Gary Tonans and everything that are real exciting and fun to watch, who are, kind of embody the spirit of what competition jiu-jitsu should be about, with actually trying to finish the guy and not just getting a couple of points and stalling. So I think
right.
people seeing that is kind of attracting them to it. And I mean, I'll be honest, EBI is one of my favorite events to watch now as far as competitions, because you always see, majority of the time you always see somebody get the finish with the way it's set up. And it's, let's be honest, it's more exciting than watching somebody get an advantage point and stall for 9 minutes afterwards to get the win.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's
Well, you
true.
probably experienced a lot of that in your weight class.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of matches because I refused to do that.
Yeah, very easily, man, if you did.
Yeah, I've been up on points and gone for something and ended up, getting behind on points when I could have just, laid there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
I wouldn't.
I'd rather lose that way than win the
I'm
other
sure
way.
your opponents are very thankful you didn't.
If I have the choice, I'd rather lose that way than to win by intentionally stalling.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So back to comics. So your most recent work is your run on Daredevil.
Yep.
So how many issues into that are you now?
Well, I just finished my run. I did 21, 22 issues, somewhere in there, something like that.
That's been the past several years now that you've been working on that.
Yeah, they had a lot of fill-ins in between. I just kept chugging along doing, my arcs. I did the majority of the, of the issues of the last few years. But they had some good artists on it. But yeah, I mean, we started out as a number one, and it was pretty successful. I'm pretty happy with at least my artistic contribution to it. And Daredevil's has such a, I don't know, a lore with great artists being on it, like Frank Miller and I don't know, John May Jr. and Lee Weeks and a lot of great guys. So I was very proud of it and honored to have been, to be included in that group of guys who have worked on that book, and that character.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that really stood out was the style you developed for that series. It's a lot different than some of your other work. How did you kind of? I'm assuming that was intentional. You wanted to come at Daredevil with a different approach, and because
Yeah.
the stuff is just amazing for people that want to go out and look. It's definitely unique.
Well, I was doing a creator own called Men of Wrath before that,
Yeah,
and
that was awesome.
that's really where I started it. I started inking that, and at first I was doing the enhanced pencils, and I like to experiment. I've always experimented with my stuff because again I get bored easy. But I like the journey of just it's an adventure to into worlds that you don't understand or know. That's what keeps the magic of something alive is when you venture into something that you're not fully comprehend and you try to learn about it. That's the fun of it. It's like sitting down at a piano. If you play a few keys and you can make a song, but you don't know what you're doing, it's like magic. So I look at art styles that way. And when I was doing the enhanced pencils, it was the best of times, the worst of times, because the pencil, when it's reproduced, can look really rough and makes it look like you're just being a lazy hack. But on the other hand, when it's done right, it can be some of the most beautiful, artwork on a printed page that you've ever seen. Just the raw, natural quality to the pencil work. Is beautiful in my opinion. That's just me. Some people.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed that look. It's definitely different, and I don't know. Just as somebody who's into artwork, I've always really liked that style.
Yeah, you put some watercolory colors over it. You can really. I still think there's something untapped there that the right person or something comes along and it's going to be there's something there that could be really stellar. Um, but I was doing that for a while, and I started doing it on Men of Wrath, and then as I was doing Men of Wrath, the tone of the story, I realized just it didn't work for the tone of that story, and I needed to go really hardcore into something, more noir. So I started inking it, and it just started developing there. I started having fun, just erasing, leaving lines out, and deliberately leaving open areas that didn't have line work, and just let the form speak for itself. And that just sort of evolved. And it was, again, serendipitous. I started Daredevil. I called Marvel, Axel, the editor at the time, editor in chief, and I just said, what do you got for me? And Daredevil happened to be open. And that's how it started, and it just worked perfectly for Daredevil, And then once I realized I was doing Daredevil, it hit me. I was like, wow, this is great. I got really motivated to really push that style even farther. And the end result was a real happy one. I think, I've clicked with something that I'm probably not going to go away from. I'm just going to keep pushing in that direction now.
Yeah, it looked great, and you could see it developing, further over as you got further into the series. I was able to pick up the style continuing to evolve the more issues you got into it.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was really cool to see. So you got any new projects coming up you can talk about?
Well, let's see. I'm just working right now on an astonishing X-Men fill-in issue. But I have the Men of Wrath is being made into a television series.
Oh, awesome!
USA Network. I get me and Jason get executive producer on it, and Jason Aaron, the writer. And so I'm excited about that. There's a little surprise thing I did for that I'm hoping is going to get used in the show.
Nice.
That I can't really say right now, but
no problem.
It's an exciting thing I did. I'll tell you off the air.
Nice.
But so there's that, and that's on USA Network. But I still wait. It takes such a long time. We started Men of Wrath. God, I think it was 2010.
Holy cow.
11 we were talking about it, maybe a little around that time we started talking about it. I'm trying to remember. I was on Wolverine at the time, and Jason had mentioned it to me. But it's been a long time, and it takes up to a decade to get these things going, and have the TV series going. But it's taking longer than I actually expected it to. They were supposed to announce it a while back, and I haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'll hear something soon. So besides that, I don't have anything lined up right away. We'll find out. I have like my shoulder operation. After that, I have some creator-owned ideas that I want to do. As Marvel agreed to let me do another creator-owned for Icon, or to bring it somewhere else if they don't want it. So I may go that route. I don't know yet. We'll see. See what happens after my shoulder surgery.
Is that on your drawing arm?
It is.
Oh, man.
I have to have a titanium ball put on my the socket. It's going to be a partial replacement, but my ball joint is so shot that it's, the doctor just said, what the heck, he said, it looked like I've been in an accident. And it's just from, being so active in jiu-jitsu and lifting weights, and I used to chop wood, and I was, I just wore it away. And I do think a large part of it was drawing and erasing on the big table. Like,
oh, okay.
Constant, friction moving back and forth with erasing over the course of, 25, 30 years, and my whole life, really, honestly. And I think it just wore my shoulder away because I can't even erase comfortably anymore. So, I'm working through it, but the doctor said with this titanium ball put on it, it'll give me like 90% mobility back, and I won't feel the pain anymore. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that's great news. They got to go in there and resurface everything and put the titanium in there and all that.
Yeah, he said that the socket looks pretty good, he said. It's just that the cartilage is so worn away. And he showed me the x-ray. The ball joint just looks like this deformed egg with a big bone spur on the bottom of it. And I've been wrestling with it for a number of years now. I've been trying to do jiu-jitsu. It was always very difficult and painful.
Yeah.
So I haven't even been training for the last bunch of months because it's just too painful now. I can't even post on it anymore. And
Yeah, I can imagine. And then you need to make sure that you can be able to continue your livelihood and draw and everything.
I'm hoping I can get back to training after it's after it's done. My right shoulder's not great either, but it's not to the degree my left shoulder is. So we'll
Right.
see. But wish me luck. Hopefully,
Oh man, I wish you nothing but the best. I want to keep seeing you drawing and keep seeing you do jujitsu.
well, I gotta keep drawing. I got 4 kids, so can't just let me go. I can let go of jiu-jitsu for a bit.
Gotta bring in that money. Gotta feed those hungry mouths, right?
Yeah, you know what that's like, brother. Where when are you gonna venture down that highway?
We're not. We're those weird people that don't want kids, man.
That's not. I don't think that's weird. I think
Hey,
it's.
a lot of people think it's weird, but yeah, neither my wife or I want kids. So I've got all
Lots of
my
people.
I've got my jujitsu kids and I've got my nieces, so I'm more than content in that department.
Right. Well, I guess it's a good thing that the world will not see more foster DNA spread throughout the. I'm just kidding.
Ah, good one.
You'll be like Genghis Khan.
See, you give people a small glimpse of how we actually are when we talk to each other.
I know. I probably should have waited till after.
I think they could get a good impression of our relationship if they go look on my Instagram at the picture. That
Uh,
was shortly after first meeting each other. So
I know. Not fine. It was a couple hours later. We're
safe to
sitting
say,
at
safe
laughs.
to say the bromance is real.
Well, I'm really hoping you get your butt out here again at some point, so you can come over to the studio and
Man, I want to.
uh,
Rich.
McKeegan, McKeegan, if
Yeah.
you get get him back out here.
Yeah, he keeps telling me he wants to have me in for like a solo seminar there at the academy or something. So, but he talks a lot, so we'll see.
What was the name I came up with for him? It was Itch McKeister.
Yep, very
Itch.
suitable. Well, listen, my friend, it's been an honor having you on here tonight. I'm sorry it took me so long to get you on here. You've been readily available and waiting. It was all on me, but I appreciate you making the time.
It was an honor to be on your podcast, Mighty James.
Awesome, my friend. Well, listen, do you have a website or anything where people can keep track of what you're doing, or is your main thing like your Instagram and social media?
Yeah, just the social media. I had a website, but it's just that I could never keep up with it with my schedule and everything. So it's just in the ether now. I think RonGarney.com is owned by someone else.
Oh man, somebody else profiting off the illustrious Ron Garney name.
No, I just think somebody owns the .com. But
That's the worst though, because that's if you ever try to get it back, they try to sell it to you for thousands of dollars.
yeah, I think this guy. This guy. His name was Big Bacon Hot Tub something. His nickname on Facebook, and he started a web. He asked me. He said, "Do you want me to do a website with you?" I'm like, "Yeah, if you want." I mean, I don't even know you, but I don't know why you're doing this. But it was nice of him. He put some stuff up, but I just couldn't keep up with it or anything. So he just fell to the wayside ultimately. So, but yeah, on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, you can keep up with me there. I'm gonna probably get one of those. What's that site where you can sell prints and it's Etsy or something?
Etsy, yeah, Etsy.
Thinking about starting an account on that.
Yeah, you should for sure.
Selling prints and T-shirts and what have you on that. But I'm going to need a manager to handle all that because I just can't keep up with it. And I have been talking to this one guy. I talked to this guy who sells me my marquees for the conventions and stuff. He might do it for me. So we'll see.
Perfect. So on Instagram, it's just at Ron Garney Art,
Yep.
and everybody can go on there and follow you, see a lot of the stuff you're working on, and keep track of all your antics.
I try not to post too many of those. Scare too many people.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, thank you again for being on, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks. Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you. Have
All
a
right.
good night.
You too. Bye.